And it looks like we are live. You can give 1 second for things to catch up. All right. I see the live button. So let's go ahead. Welcome to Live Coding Happy Hour for, what date is this? Good gravy. September 23rd.
23rd.
The 23rd. That's the hardest question I'm going to face today is what day is it? September 23rd. So we are going to we're going to ease into the weekend with a little live coding. So I am Dave Slusher, developer evangelist for the platform business unit. And with me is my colleague,
Josh Nerius. I'm also a developer evangelist in Dave's area.
All right. So Josh, you are going to be driving today. Give us a quick overview of what you're going to be talking about.
So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is my Mango even keel ballast point. I'm going San Diego today. And I've gone Chicago the last few times. But yes, we've got beer. Aside from that, I'm going to be talking about bit.ly, however you want to pronounce that. And I'm going to try to do some integrations that require dealing with OAuth and some of the nastiness that can come along with that. I should replace that word with some of the fun that comes along with that.
There you go. That's what this is all about. Again, as always, we're going to work through the issues, not guaranteed to get somewhere, but the whole point of all these things is to kind of show the struggle. And that's why we started doing these. We never coordinate. However, I also have a ballast point. And I have the fine habanero sculpin. I was just in the mood for that. And so, again, this is my designated driver beer because I cannot put it in my mouth fast enough because it's so hot that it will burn me if I tried to chug it. So, all right, let's go ahead and take it away. So, Josh, if you want to, you have a sip there, and then share your screen, and we will kind of get into it.
Perfect.
So Josh, and just as housekeeping, while Josh kind of gets that set up, if you is this the first one since the live? We did one last week, and we were kind of figuring our way. It was me and Chuck. Josh was not on last week. You can, if you're on YouTube, you can ask questions there. I will try to monitor all the places a question can arise now, which could be on the community, could be on the Hangout page, could be on YouTube. There is a group. If you're watching on YouTube itself, you can enter a question or a comment in that little group chatty thing there. Okay.
And we already have a comment. So, yes, Andrew, Mango, I don't know what to tell you there, but it's actually pretty good. It's an IPA on top of that. So I'll let you know how it goes.
All right. And I believe I have locked this onto Josh. So hopefully that is the case now.
Okay, cool. If you're not seeing this, post a comment. But yes, I believe you are correct. So first, a little bit of a recap. Before, I think this was maybe 3 or 4 times ago, I was working on an application that I was calling the Artifact Manager. And I'm just going to pull that up here. And just kind of a quick reminder of what this is, and then why I'm trying to build what I'm building today. So the idea behind Artifact Manager is that that is Dave and I have a series of things that we work on, whether that's blog posts or videos or this live coding happy hour. And all of these have things that we have to do. So, perhaps it's research about a blog post, or maybe it's dealing with social media engagement as we publish things. And one of the things that I would like to do is integrate link shortening into the application. So when we publish something, we've got our public URL, but then I can use the bit.ly URL shortening service to just go out there, get a short link, and without having to go and actually do that manually. And then the cool thing about that is you can see analytics on the link, and you can see history of what's going on. So that's a little bit of a background. So to see what that would look like, if I go into one of these, here's a blog post. It's not published, or actually it is published apparently. And it's called Intro to Scripted REST APIs. I want to be able to say, you have my published URL, and I want to generate a short link because that's just long and ugly. And I'm using a silly example, but hopefully it will demonstrate what we're trying to do.
So are you going to architect it so that it would keep the original URL as well as a shortened URL, or are you going to have it replace the published URL in there?
So I'm going to keep both because I want to be able to replace the published URL. So if we decided to change something for whatever reason, we can always change that published URL. Mm-hmm. And then potentially, this is something that we'll have to learn along the way, I guess, is if we can actually change the link behind a bit.ly behind a bit.ly hash.
That I can answer that for you. Is once you create that, those are immutable.
They are immutable. So
because otherwise, yeah, there's actually a design decision for that, and I think all URL shorteners, or at least all ethical URL shorteners, do that, because otherwise, you could publish an URL, get people to link to it, and then swap it out for something unintended afterwards. So I think every URL shortener of any repute does not allow you to change what's underneath a shortened URL.
That makes perfect sense. So yeah, so I guess in that case, what our use case would be is, or what the flow would potentially be, is if we do change the URL, we would go out and generate a new link and do that automatically, and then bring that in. So the first thing is, I did spend a little bit of time reading up on the documentation, so that we're not sitting here doing that on this presentation, but just as kind of a start to the process, I'm just going to go out there and Google for the bit.ly API, because I know that there's something out there for this. This is typically how you'd end up going out there and trying to build something from scratch if you've never done it before. And here we've got bit.ly's handy documentation site. So if I look at this and we look at getting started API documentation, we see that for authentication, this supports OAuth. And this is something, the reason I want to highlight this is OAuth is something that's becoming increasingly common across APIs that are available. And ServiceNow has OAuth support, and it's not very hard to set up, but occasionally there are some things that you can run into along the way. And so we're just going to kind of see how this goes. And I kind of hope this doesn't go well, so we get to show you some of the workarounds, because there's the happy path where you plug all the values in and you just save it and it's all good. And then there's the slightly less happy path where you have to do some extra work to make it happen. So
making that not go well sounds like a solvable problem, my friend. That doesn't sound that hard to pull off.
Yes. So I'll, maybe just drink an extra lot. No, I'm kidding there. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to create a bit.ly account, because generally speaking, when you create, so what's going to happen with OAuth is you first generally will have to register an application. And when you do that, we're going to be dealing with some sensitive values that I don't really want to share with the entire world. So I'm just going to create a new account and use some handy dandy plus addressing to see if I can get letting me have 2 accounts. Promise I'm not a robot. Let's see. Let me just do this. Now you all know my email address, but that's okay. Let's create. Apparently I have lots of bit.ly accounts.
If you really need it, I have some domains that you could put any, where entire domains forward to me. But any username you want, and it wouldn't matter.
Okay, here we go. We are good.
Okay, great. Okay.
So we're good here. We can start by creating bit links, and this is what the end user would normally see. They can just come in here and they can create their bit links. That's not what we want. So when we look here, we see that there's a developer access portal. And if we click on that, let's take a look. And this is what a lot of APIs are going to give you. You're going to have some kind of registration page like this. We're going to have to go out there and set this up. Now, this wants me to verify my email address first. So I'm just going to go off screen here really quick and do that.
All right. And I will try to talk while you. I should have had something prepared to talk about while you do those things. That should be the role of the co-pilot, is to have something. It's very much like being it's like being the color commentator in a baseball game.
And they certainly have to come up with lots of things to talk about. So all right, I verified that. I can now come in here and generate a token, and this process is going to look different between various systems. So in this case, I'm going to register my application. This is sending me a registration code. So bit.ly likes lots and lots of validation along the way to probably make sure that I'm not a robot or I'm doing something nefarious. And let me pull this over here. So I've got my registration code. I'm just going to call this ServiceNow. What do I want to call this? ServiceNow bit.ly integration. My application link is just going to be my instance name in this case. And then this is where it gets a little trickier. So what we have to think about is what the redirect URL is going to be. And if you've never set up OAuth before, I'll show you what this looks like on the ServiceNow side. But for now, just trust me that this is going to be OAuth Redirect.do.
This is the endpoint that OAuth is taking you to after you finish a transaction. Is that right?
Yep, that's exactly it. So yeah, what's going to happen is after we authorize, once we authorize ourselves on the Bitly side, Bitly is going to redirect back to this URL. And we can actually define that at the time we ask for an authorization token or for an access token. And if we send the wrong URL, so if somebody decided to come in here and put their own URL, it's not going to redirect to them. So this is a way to make sure that we're only redirecting back to where we want to go. And then I'll just say LCHH. So we'll create the app. And now this is the part that I'm going to have to delete when we're done, because these values are something you generally never want to share with people. And I'm sharing them on a live YouTube stream. But essentially what these are is the client ID and the client secret are values that we're going to now use on the ServiceNow side to connect to Bitly, and then allows us to go through the process of actually getting authorizations. So let me go to my ServiceNow instance. And let me go ahead and just make sure I've got the right application selected. Here we go. Artifact Manager, select. All right. And now we're going to search for OAuth. So there's this thing called Application Registry. And there are a few in here out of the box. I've got a variety of things. I actually did a presentation at CreatorCon 16, so we've got some other stuff in there. And when you create these, you're going to have two options. You have the option to create an OAuth endpoint for external clients, and that's when you want some other application to talk to ServiceNow using OAuth. We want to connect to a third party. So in this case... So
is this, that was basically, we're looking at inbound and outbound. That was the two.
That's exactly it, inbound and outbound. Okay. So this is outbound, and you're going to have to create at least one of these for any external API that you set up. So I'm just going to call this Bitly. This is where we now get to use our client ID and our client secret. So let me just go back here and copy these.
And as we mentioned before, so you have been in this world a little bit. You know, you did stuff at Knowledge and CreatorCon, and I am more or less like I walked through your material, but that is almost the sum total of everything I've ever done with OAuth. So you are way ahead in this one, and I'm kind of doing my best to kind of hang on. So I'm the voice of the person who doesn't know much about OAuth here.
No problem at all. So yeah, and so that's actually good, because I think that'll help. Hopefully you'll have questions that that I can answer along the way as well. So a couple of things that we have to know here as we set this up. First is we have to know what the grant type is, and this is going to vary depending on the particular implementation of OAuth, and different APIs are going to implement this differently. I did a little reading ahead through the documentation, and I happen to know that they're using authorization code. I don't remember what these URLs are, though. So what I'm going to do is go back to our documentation. If I can
and that's a thing that you would have to look up, right? It wouldn't necessarily be obvious from looking at it. You would have to look, like for whoever you're integrating with, you would have to find out what it is that they do, or does it become obvious as you're doing it?
It's going to be specific to whoever you're integrating with. So I'm going to have to look through the documentation here to find that. So anytime, what this is saying here is that if we're using OAuth, we have to use the HTTPS endpoint, which makes sense because we want those redirects back and forth to be encrypted. And here we go. So we want to redirect the user to this authorization link. And so this is, again, always going to be in the documentation for the API. So we'll take that, put that in the authorization URL. And now we need to find the token URL, and I'll talk more about those in a moment to tell you what they are. So let's just look for, I guess we'll just kind of work our way down here. So the next thing is they're posting to OAuth access token at API SSL. So we'll copy this. It's going to be HTTPS. And I've already forgotten it because I have no short-term memory. There we go.
It seems slightly unfriendly to not have one nice long pastable URL there.
It would be, yeah, that would be very nice of them to just say, here's your auth link, here's your token link, and you're good to go. That would be much better. So now I'm going to save this really quick before I keep talking about it. And you'll notice that as soon as I save that, we have a redirect URL that's auto-generated. Theoretically, you could change this redirect URL, but this is generally always going to be OAuth Redirect.
Where did it get that from?
So really,
that's the auto-generated one.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
And yeah, this is literally as dumb as saying take the gs.getProperty instance name plus OAuth Redirect is basically what it is. It's
I gotcha.
Just generating that URL.
I was thinking for 1 second that it had interrogated that from Bitly, but I realized it hasn't. Probably doesn't have enough information to do that, and you're
correct.
Just you gave it the default, and that is defaulting to the default. So that's why they're the same.
Yep, absolutely. Okay,
gotcha.
So we're good there. So now what's going to happen is we need to set up, in order to test this thing out, we actually need to set up a REST message. And from that REST message, we can then go ahead and actually try to get a token. So with that, let me go back to our documentation. Let's just pick one of these. Let's just do shorten, because I think that makes sense. And what we'll do is we'll copy that. And now I'm going to do, if you've never seen REST messages before, this is just the simple process of setting up a REST message. So in this case, we're going to say bit.ly shorten. We specify our endpoint. And password needs to stop popping up. There we go. So our endpoint is going to be /v3/shorten. Get rid of that extra slash there. Now, if we were doing basic authentication, this is where we would usually just hit basic and we put in a username and password. But in this case, we want OAuth. So we'll select OAuth, and then we have to specify our OAuth profile. And if we open this up, there are a couple in there from previous projects. In this case, here's the bit.ly default profile.
And that's the one you just created.
Yep, I just created that now for the first time ever. And now, as soon as we specify that profile, we see this message at the top that says OAuth access or refresh tokens are not available. Verify the configuration. Click get auth token. So this is the moment of truth. This will either work or it won't.
And you got that because it's never happened at this point. So it's never been filled.
Exactly, it's never been filled, and yeah, and so at this point we have to get some token into the system before we can do anything. Okay. So in this case, what's happened is this has launched that authorization URL. We have passed in a couple of things. So remember that redirect URL that we specified? That's been passed along with the client ID and the client ID. And so now this is actually bit.ly. So bit.ly is saying, do you want to allow ServiceNow bit.ly integration to access your account? So this is, I'm not actually passing credentials inside of ServiceNow. I'm authorizing this on the bit.ly side. I'm never putting my bit.ly username and password into ServiceNow. So I'll go ahead and say allow.
Right. Ooh.
And it's broken. So
but that is your, note that that's your instance saying that.
It is. So here is an interesting thing I've noticed with OAuth. And actually, I was joking earlier about, well, only half joking about things breaking. I'm actually happy this happened because this is one of the more common situations that you could run into when you're setting up OAuth.
Okay.
So what we have to do is look at some logs and see why. Usually when it says that, what's happening is something didn't quite work out in the whole transaction. And instead of giving us a helpful error message, it's a little bit non-specific right now, and it comes back with that 401.
So tell us what you can infer from. So at that point, probably what's happened, you've sent your REST message over to get your tokens. It came back, and then trying to reload your instance, your landing page for that, like post exchange of that transaction, that's when you got this error. Is that right?
Yep, that's exactly it. And yeah, so basically it's things appear to have gone okay on the bit.ly side, but something about the response, something about how the data was returned back to ServiceNow didn't know how to parse it. And actually, let me just pause here for a second, because this is one of the common challenges with OAuth. It's there's a standard that defines, generally speaking, what OAuth2 means and how things should interact. But there are differences in implementations. So as an example, when Johnny Jardy and I built the whole Slack integration for CreatorCon, we had to customize things because Slack doesn't actually implement OAuth quite the same as anybody else. So I'm guessing, I'm not sure here, but I'm guessing that there's something unique about how they've implemented OAuth here, and we have to handle it for ourselves. So
Right.
I'm going to...
I'm not even seeing an error.
I'm not either. So I'm going to actually download the node log, which I hate having to do right now. But let's see what we got. See if I can find today. What is today? Today's the 23rd.
The 23rd, yes.
There we go. And yeah, so the node logs are definitely your friend. Sometimes it's unfortunate that you have to download them, but that's okay. And so what we're going to look for here is, when I get my window over to that screen, is anything with OAuth in it. There we go. And so it looks like we've been doing some stuff here. Let me see if bit.ly shows up here anywhere.
Can you jump to the end and then search up?
That's a good question.
People rave about Sublime. I've never actually used it myself, so I'm not...
Here we go. So OAuth Redirect Processor. Yep, so this is kind of what I was thinking might have been the case. What's happening is there's something... So after... Let me just go back to the ServiceNow instance, and I can talk through sort of the flow of what's going on here. So let's go to Registry. My super fast employee instance here. And so what's happening is, first we're hitting the authorization URL, and that's what we saw. And then after the authorization URL, we saw that in the response, I mean, it's redirecting, and we got a code. So we got an authorization code. But now what's supposed to happen is that authorization code needs to get passed to, off to the token URL. So we pass that authorization code to the token URL, and then we're supposed to get an access token back. Something about getting that access token back is not getting parsed by ServiceNow. So when you go to your error URL, what was the ultimate URL that was giving that 401? So the URL that's giving the 401 right now is this OAuth Redirect. So this is kind of that
OAuth Redirect. Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And this is really the only place that we should ever end up after a redirect, is it should come back to that OAuth Redirect. And generally speaking, if something goes wrong, this is probably where it's going to stop.
Okay.
This is helpful, though, because now what we can see is that it says it's missing the access token parameter. And to me, and unfortunately, so just kind of an aside, I'll be writing some blog posts about this, but unfortunately, this means that something about the response didn't get picked up by the default parsing that's in place for OAuth. So it means that bit.ly is returning the OAuth token in a slightly different way than we're expecting it, is what I'm guessing. So, so with that, this is where we get into level 2. There is a thing here called OAuth API script. And what this is this actually allows you to define sort of an override handler. A script includes to override the functionality. And let me just show you what that looks like. Script includes, come on, load up.
All right. So what you're saying is that even though it doesn't have the right syntactic stuff there, you still have a tool in the belt.
Yep, we still have a way to get around this. And so this is actually kind of exactly what I was hoping was going to happen, so that I could kind of talk about this and how this works. So this is the default. There's this script include called OAuth util. And what happens in this OAuth util is there are a couple of, during the OAuth flow, these various methods get called. And so when we get a token response, it calls parse token response, which in turn calls this post process the access token. And so what this is currently doing is it's saying, if we get a JSON object back, go and decode the JSON and then return this parameter map that has all of the values. And so essentially this is what we're going to then use as the access token. But if it didn't come back as JSON, we currently have no idea what's happening. So essentially, all we have to do to make this work is I'll create a new script include, and I'm just going to call this. Paste this down here first. We'll call this OAuth bit.ly handler. We'll see if that works. It's not.
And is it okay? Do you want it in this scope, or do you want it? Does it matter?
So that's actually a great question. I'm glad you asked that, and I think this actually has to be global. So yep, that is a great call, and we found this out the hard way in Creator Con. Let's go ahead and switch to global. Even though that says global, apparently I'm not in global. So let's just kick it into gear. All right. No, now it says Active Directory. Come on. There we go. And so basically what this has done is we've taken the default stuff that's there. I'm just going to comment some of this out.
Okay.
And I just want to start dumping information about this. Because we know that we've got, it has something to do with the access token. I'm just going to assume that it has something to do with processing this. We've got the content type inside here. It looks like they're doing this whole get body thing. So I want to do that as well, just so I can see what the body is. And then let's log this. Body. And let's just see what that comes back with. Hopefully that'll give us a clue of something, or even show us if anything is happening. Maybe it's not even working at all. So let me tab. Do I still have that REST message open? I do not. So I need to go back to that REST message. So we'll try this again. Click allow. Get the same thing again, which we expect. And let me just open up a new tab with logging. And do we have anything? Let's just make sure this is sorted. Looks like the last log was a while ago, so maybe that's not even. Oh, I know why. That there's a very good reason for that, and it's because I need to actually.
You did not set the. That.
I did not.
Okay.
Yep. So.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So once you create it, yeah, it doesn't magically know, and so we have to go into our bit.ly OAuth registry record here, and we can specify our auth script include. There's one thing to note is you'll see that it shows up. I've got my OAuth bit.ly handler. The way this field works is it's looking for any script include that starts with the word OAuth. So be aware of that if you're creating one, it's got to start with the word OAuth.
That's a good thing to know. That seems a little bit obscure and cryptic.
I would agree.
Okay. So gotta
Yep.
be forewarned on that one, people, is that there's a secret API there, which is start with OAuth.
Yes. And now I'll just use the back button instead of having to go back. And there we go. Should have hopefully triggered it this time. Go ahead and refresh. Boom. So we've got a content type. It's actually coming back as application form URL encoded.
There you go. So, okay. So you have the thing.
Yep. And the good news is we actually got something. So it's not coming back with nothing. So that makes me happy.
Right. So from the bit.ly end, everything you wanted to do happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it just came back, and the default, like this would have worked if this came back as a JSON, all that data in bound up in JSON with a JSON data type, it would have worked out of the box. But because it's not that it's not that content type and it's not JSON, you're going to have to parse it yourself.
Yeah, we're going to have to parse this, and that parsing could vary. I mean, it could have been XML, it could have been, could have come back in various ways. So this looks like it's just a string. I'm just going to blindly code and decide that it is a string. Let's see what happens. This is going better than I thought it would. Just go back and find my script include. And I'll tell you this, the first time that I ran into this, and this was, again, with Slack, I probably spent 3 days fighting it. And so if you've been doing this, if anybody watching has gone through this process, I only found this because I've had to go through this before in a very slow and a very painful way. So hopefully this will help you not have to go through that same pain. So, all right, so we've got our content body. At this point, we should have a string. I'm just going to say var params. Let me just look at that log again. It's all just URL. So we can just split on the ampersand, I think. We'll just do some simple parsing. And then let's do
need a loop.
Some fancy ECMA5 scripting.
There you go.
And now we actually need parts. So let's just call this for our parts. And we will say parts equals param.split on the equal sign. There might be a better way to parse this, but I'm just doing simple string.
Yeah, I think it's good
manipulation
enough.
Here.
So, like, for example, you could, instead of parsing it this way, you could just say get the access token, but you think you might need all the stuff at some point. So
yeah, I might. Yeah, I don't really know, to be perfectly honest with you. And there are some things. Yeah, we might just be able to say, yeah, find the access token, or you can even do a regex to pull out the access token. However you want to get it, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But if there were additional things, or if they change the API in the future, this probably just makes it a little bit easier.
Do you need one more array to keep these parsed results?
So that's, yeah, let me read. This is where I'm going to look at what this is happening out of the box. So out of the box, this is going out there and it's saying, get me a parameter map. So I'm just going to copy that up here because that was what was happening before. And what they're doing is for every key value pair in that JSON object, they're saying param map.put. So I'm just going to do the same thing with my parts that I extract here. Before I do, I'm just going to log this really quick to make sure it worked. So we'll say key equals the first element, value equals the second element at the one index, and let's see what happens. And then if that works, we'll go on to the next step. And there we go. So we got key equals login, value equals Josh Nerius, key equals access token, and
all right,
that key. So we got these values. Cool.
Beautiful.
That is what we wanted. So, and also that verifies that it was a string, or at least something that could be coerced into a string without me having to worry about it. So now we will do param map.put and parts 0, parts 1. And this is, I mean, this looks weird, but basically what's happening is the access token response. This is going to be returned back into sort of the core OAuth processing logic in ServiceNow. And the parameters that are returned, the parameters that are in this map, are what that core processing code is looking for. Mm-hmm. So that's essentially what we're doing. I just want to, this isn't some kind of weird magic. We're basically just saying, get those values, make them available to the OAuth engine so that it can now do what it needs to do.
Can you scroll down a little tiny bit more?
Yep.
So is that the return value, or it's not even? How does that?
So what's happening is we're getting a reference to the access token response, and we're basically mutating it. So we're saying,
okay,
we've just got a reference to it, and now we're injecting stuff into it.
Oh, I see. So that's okay. So up there at that definition of param map.
Yeah,
that's you're adding those to the parameters of the access token response by doing
exactly.
This.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I was looking there. I was trying to figure out the magic of how that param map went anywhere else, but that's how it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, if anybody noticed that that's a lowercase p, that is a lowercase p, and it drives me nuts.
And I don't know why it's like that. Like The one lone non-camel case API in the entire system.
Exactly.
Specifically to trigger OCD.
Yep, and it certainly has triggered mine. So, all right, so let's go back, and with any luck, I'm going to click allow. And you know what? Let me just reload this. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Click allow. Oh my goodness, it went away.
Wow.
So now where did my REST message go? I think that just worked. I just have to find my REST message. I probably need to go back there. Whoops, I didn't need to get an OAuth token. Why do I have no... I need to turn on... This keeps happening to me. I don't know if you've seen this happen before, but it stops loading my related lists until I turn that back on. All right, let's reload this.
I've not noticed that.
Cool. So we got an access token. It says it's available, but it will expire on 9/23 at 14:34. So this actually worked. It went out there and got an access token, and we can verify this by going to, let me see if I can remember it. It's OAuth.
30 minutes after you got it, right? Is that...
Yeah.
Who was enforcing that? Was that Bitly, or was that your side that's setting that?
So in this case, it's probably Bitly that's enforcing that. And when we configure our thing here, so we've got a refresh token lifespan. In this case, the default value is 8 million something odd seconds. A very, very long time.
1 week, right?
Yeah, I think
Something like
30 days. It might be 30 days. It's either a week or it's 30 days. That's what we're defaulting to, but it sounds like they're enforcing something on their side. Okay. So that is something to be aware of. The other thing is we can go to the OAuth credential table, and also just another note for any future watchers. I'm deleting all of this stuff, including the account that I created after this presentation. This is kind of like showing your password to people. So we see that we've got this token now. We have linked it to the Bitly default profile. This is the actual token value that we want to send, and that's what we're going to send to, that's what we're going to use for authentication. It was generated by me, the admin, and the peer is the entity scope. I don't think we're going to have to get into entity scopes today. Basically, entity scopes would be, think about the calendar API in Google. And you could say something like, I want to allow it to read my calendar, but not write to it or create new entries or whatever else. And that's where entity scopes allow you to define what kinds of permissions are you granting through this whole thing. We don't need to worry about that today, maybe some other time.
Okay.
So now that we have this, I'm going to try to actually run that REST message. Let's see what happens.
All right. So what we've done up to this point is we've wired this up. We've correctly... So OAuth is now hooked up. You had to write a custom handler on your end to parse what you get back at token exchange. So all that was like prerequisite work before we actually even hit the first API.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Okay. And there's one step that I missed here that I probably should have started with, and that is usually before I start any of this, I will fire up either Postman or Paw or whatever your REST API tool of choice. Postman is particularly good at this, and you can plug in all of your OAuth values and get this up and running in Postman in a matter of minutes. Mm-hmm. And the thing that it does is it maintains your sanity so that you know that your stuff is actually working before you go and start, you know, digging into logs and downloading node logs and writing handlers. Because if you can't get it working in Postman, there's no sense in spending 3 days trying to get it working in ServiceNow.
Gotcha. Okay.
So something to think about. And I probably should have started.
And you would use Postman to hit the Bitly APIs first. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it's part of that. So let me actually, I'm just going to pause for a second because I think this is extremely important. So if I go and, you know, if I just look at any request here, I can go to authorization. I can say OAuth 2.0, and this is for some other, oh, I guess this is when I was testing Bitly earlier. So yeah, this is basically you specify all of your stuff there, and then you can actually exchange tokens that way.
And this is all the same. This is just the same information that you put into your REST message.
Yep, all the same information.
I'm sorry, into your Bitly profile.
Correct. And so it's essentially do all of that there, you know, get that access token, that client ID, all of that stuff, do that externally, and then try to do it in ServiceNow.
Okay.
So now that we have that, let's go back to our Bitly documentation. I need to figure out how to actually do this. So we need to pass, so we can authenticate either using OAuth2 or an API key. If we scroll down, it looks like all we have to do is we can actually do a get. That's interesting. I figured this would be a post. So we pass in our access token. Okay, so let's give this a shot.
Yeah, that actually does surprise me a little too. I would have also thought that would be a posty type thing.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So in this case, we are passing these URL parameters. It was long URL, and we'll just set up a property here. And if you've never set up a REST message before, what this is allowing us to do is we're passing in query parameters, and we're parameterizing it so that when we actually call this from code, we can say, set the parameter called long URL, and it will just pass it into this template, and we don't have to worry about it, which is pretty nice.
Do you need to add access token there, or does that happen automatically from?
That's what we're going to find out. That is what we're going to find out. And I have not tried this, so it's another opportunity for failure and discovery.
All right.
So we're going to set the long URL, and I'm just going to plug our portal because we haven't done that yet today. So developer.servicenow.com. We will go ahead and hit test, and I'm not going to set the authentication type because I believe is going to inherit it from its parent, but we will see. So click test. It's missing the access token.
Okay.
All right, so let's try just specifying this here first. And let's see what we have available. There's our bit.ly profile. Let's try that. OAuth token has expired or has not been retrieved. So what might be happening, maybe it actually did. Let's just go ahead and refresh our OAuth token here just in case. Let's test that again. Yeah, it's still missing the access token. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how to get the access token into the request automatically. And that's interesting. So what I'm curious about is I don't actually know what this is doing, what this is sending by default. How is actually passing that auth token? So if
we look at the test run, will that show us what it sent?
It's not, but actually we have a trick for how we can do that. So this is going to show us the parameters, but it's not showing us the raw headers. What's probably happening is a lot of APIs, instead of passing an authorization basic header, I have a strong suspicion that this is passing a thing called authorization bearer. And so basically a bearer token is generally what we pass when we're dealing with OAuth. But there's this thing called HTTP bin. And if you've never heard of this or never used this, actually, no, it's not HTTP bin. It's, what is it? It's HTTP. Oh, I'm going to completely forget. Google it. What's on there? It's request bin. That's what it is. There we go. So what this lets you do is you can actually create an endpoint and then inspect the requests that are coming through it, which is really, really useful when you're dealing with this kind of stuff. So this is my workflow when I'm dealing with this. I'm going to go in here and change the endpoint. And we're going to see what happens.
So you're doing this so you can just go to request bin and see what you sent in.
Exactly. Do I have to send some extra stuff?
Did you refresh that page? And you tested that?
Yeah, let's test this again. That's what I did a moment ago, but I didn't like it very much. What's it telling me? It's saying, has banned your access based on your browser's signature.
Huh.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. Well, either way, let me put it this way. I'm 99% sure I know what's happening here. And it's that what's going on is we're passing it as a bearer token instead of a URL. Now, what I don't know, I honestly have never even tried to do this before, is if we can actually go and look at that script include and modify it to pass it as a URL parameter. So let me take a look at that.
And while you do that, question from the chat: can you put the OAuth info into a Base64 encrypted variable?
The OAuth info into a Base64 encrypted variable. That's a good question. I'm not sure I fully understand where they're going with that. Is the goal to essentially obscure that information so that nobody can see it? We'll see. Give them a minute. And I'm looking request parameter map, preprocess.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
So
I was going to say, if you Base64, well, so Base64 encoding it is not by default going to, if the other end doesn't know that you're Base64 encoding it, I don't know that that's going to work, right?
Yeah, well, that's the trouble. And the thing is here is that the whatever the partner system that you're talking to, it's going to expect that access token exactly as it was issued. And so on the ServiceNow side, we protect that by saying that only administrators have access to that table. It is important to know that administrators, essentially that the OAuth credential table holds credentials. The key, though, is that those credentials do expire. And so it's not quite the same as having a password in a table, because that credential is going to die and go away relatively quickly. It can also be revoked outside of ServiceNow. So if for some reason, maybe somebody that wasn't supposed to have access to it got access to it, I'm just trying to think of maybe what the use cases there might be. But we can take that one and chat about that later. So I'm looking, and I don't see a place, because here's the thing: is the intercept request parameters here is for when we actually go out and we try to get the auth token. Parsing the token response, I don't see anything here. Pre-process access token. What I don't know is when this is getting called. So I'm just gonna actually drop some logging into logs. Anybody on the Slack chat is probably screaming that, as they should. And I just want to see when this gets called. I want to see if this gets called when we try to actually do our REST test. Because if it gets called during the REST test, we might be able to intercept the outbound thing and then add something to it. And then if all else fails, if we can't get that going, and see, my related lists are not there yet again. Why? Anyway, I'll have to look into that one later. Really? After the form loads. There we go. So if we test that, and now what I want to do is I want to look at my logs and see, do we have something
Whoa. Back up. You were still hitting request bin.
And that's okay. I'll switch it back. But
oh, okay. Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you're looking at what you're sending.
Exactly. What I want to find here is I really want to find if I have anything that says pre-processing, and I don't. So the short answer here is that for some reason I don't have, I don't seem to be able to intercept the process of constructing the app on request. So this is going to be an interesting topic for a future thing.
So well, as I'm looking at those logs, I noticed that you've got, if you look at the logs, so you got 2 different sysids for the requester. What is happening there where you're bouncing between those two?
So sorry, what? Say that again.
So if you notice, like your top one is that D15, and then under that you got the AA2B. So it appears that you've got two different values that are filling in that requester. Where is that coming from?
That's a great question. I don't know. What I will do is I will look to see if we assume that they're users. I don't know if they are. Take a look. And that one's not found. So it actually might be the REST message, maybe. I already looked at. Let's try this one. Yeah, so they're clearly not users. I don't actually know what the requester is in this particular context.
Okay.
And it looks like it actually changes throughout. So
I wonder if that has something to do with, would that have been when you had the different URL?
Could be. It could be. That's an interesting.
Okay, I don't want to derail the thing. I just noticed.
Yeah. No,
a thing looked different there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I don't know. I didn't actually know that we logged that much information every time that out here, so that's kind of interesting. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up OAuth Credential. So see, we do have two. So what I'm guessing, yeah, so the OAuth requester profile, let's click on that and see what that looks like.
Oh, there's your requester. Right
so it is, yeah, so that requester appears to be the profile itself.
So what's the other one, though?
That's also a good question. And they both say bit.ly default. So maybe it is when I know what it is. I know exactly what it is. So I did when I was testing things out, I set up one at the REST message level, and I set up one at the REST request or method level. So there's one in the message, one in the method.
Okay.
So that makes sense. That makes me feel a little bit better. To at least know what's going on. But what we can do now is we can just copy this, and just to make sure things are working, I should really just bookmark this because I keep going here. Is we will, for now, cheat a little bit and just set up an HTTP request or a query parameter. Hopefully that's the name of it. We'll find out in a moment. Let's go and look.
Right, and this is not a permanent solution because, for one thing, that particular one is going to expire in
exactly
10 minutes or something.
Yeah, and I'll talk in a minute about some ways that we can potentially work around this long term. So there we go. Let's test this. I need to fix my endpoint because I haven't fixed that yet. So let me go ahead and do that now. And we're going to go to v3 shorten. And it worked. So what's happened, we passed our token, we passed our URL, and we got back our hash. And if I go into a new window and say bit.ly/that thing, go to developer.servicenow.com. So we successfully shortened it. So that part's working. So next step. And I'm going to pause for a moment and refresh my take a quick drink.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, no new questions there in the chat. Actually, while you're doing that, while you do the next thing, I will double check that we aren't getting any from any other points.
Sounds good. And so what I'm going to do, so now that we have this stuff set up, so first off, how are we on time? How much time do we have left?
It's 25 after the hour, but we can go.
Okay. Because what I want to do is we don't have to go to any extreme lengths, but I at least want to tie this to my artifact table in a very simple way. And what I want to do first, so if we go in here, if you've never set these up before, once you have configured one of these messages and the methods that are underneath it, you can go and click Preview Script Usage. And what this is going to do is it's going to give you a baseline script that you can use to sort of get started. And that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to open Studio just to make life a little bit nicer. And I'm going to go ahead and add this to the artifact table. So what we want is we want a business rule. We want that on the artifact table. And we're going to say anytime we change the URL, we're going to do something and generate a bit.ly. And we're going to say that advanced on insert and update, we have to run async because we're in a scoped application, and in order to make REST calls in a scoped app, you've got to run them asynchronously, which is a good thing. We'll copy this in here for now, and let's see what we've got. So we're setting our string parameter that we configured earlier. I talked about that a little bit, so this allows us to pass those values into that template. We've got a response back, and just to make things easy, I'm going to add. Oh, go ahead.
So would you be able to, since you're doing your REST call programmatically, would you be able to do a glide query to get that access token, or would you not have access to do that?
So yeah, that's a good point. So let me, before I continue setting this up, I'll pause for a second on that. There are a series of OAuth APIs, and they are documented. They're out there on developer.servicenow.com underneath our API documentation. And from within those, you can actually go out and interact with various OAuth configurations that are there. So while it's not as automagical as I would like it to be, what we can actually do is we don't have to go out and do a glide record query, because what could happen there is maybe that thing is expired, and then if it's expired, we have no way to deal with that. Mm-hmm. But using those OAuth APIs, we can interact with, and we should be able to get that token and then apply it as a parameter here.
Okay.
So, I don't think we'll have the time to get through that today, so I'm not going to start it, but that that might be a nice follow-up. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if current dot, I don't happen to know off the top of my head what the name is of that field. So I'll just go find out.
It's where tabs.
Tabs are very nice. Apparently, I have a very weird view here. There's the published URL. I don't know why that looks like that. I need to zboot my instance. So publish URL is what we're looking for. So current.publish URL, that changes, and that should work. Even though it's async, it should work because this is happening at the time of the record update. What's inside here will execute later. And let's just see what happens. So let's move that off to the side. Go to artifacts.
But you had done an add info message. Will that?
That's not going to work. No, it won't.
Because you're doing it async.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So let's do this instead. It's super quick and dirty. I would usually say don't do this. We just want to see some responses quickly. So we'll open our blog, we'll put something in there, and let's see what happens. And the first thing that I'm realizing, did we extend task? Because if we did not, there is no work notes. Yep.
So you want to just really quick switch that to a log?
Yeah, I'll just do that.
Does it have to be info? Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to go one step further. the response body. And now we'll update one of these. This can be anything right now because we're not worrying about that. Yeah, let's go look at our logs. And so there we go. We've got our response back. And so now it should be as simple as saying, let's go ahead and pass in current.published URL. And then in a response, we're going to parse that. So we're going to say var response object is.
So now I'm actually confused. How is the access token happening in there? So you did actually successfully hit bit.ly.
I did hit bit.ly, and it's because the access token is still embedded in that REST message.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
So we got about another 5 minutes where that'll work.
Exactly. and once that stops working, then we get into the next topic of OAuth, which is refresh tokens, which again will probably be sort of a follow-up at some later date. So now we've got a response object. If we go back and let's just verify, we want to go for the data.url. And what we can say is current.abstract response object.data.url. We're just going to save that in there. And I've got something weird going on. Missing name after dot operator. What?
Don't do the dot. Do that might be a reserved word.
Abstract?
No, data. So try doing response object bracket data. Yeah. Dot URL. Was that what it was?
Yeah, I think it was URL. Let's try that. Does not like it. Let me just get rid of that line altogether real quick. Likes that. What did we discover today? Maybe it doesn't like abstract. Yeah, it doesn't like abstract. So
weird.
Yeah, very weird. Interesting.
I would not have known that.
No, and just to.
Oh, I wonder if that's abstract is a reserved word because you can make an abstract class.
It would be in Java, but I'm not aware of any such thing in JavaScript. But I don't know. That's.
Let me do a quick Google while you do what you're doing.
Cool. Yeah, I'm super curious about that now. So while you do that, let me go ahead and update my publish URL again.
Abstract is a reserved word.
Interesting. What does it do?
I don't know. I just see a list of reserved words and it's on that. Let me look up that one specifically.
And I'm just going to log this as well because logs are your friend, and we don't know what's happening with it yet. I think it's been parsed, but it doesn't look like it liked it. So let's save. Unexpected token U, and it doesn't like. It really hates something. So data, URL, that's all good. What am I not seeing here? Let's get rid of these just because. Oh, it's because I'm trying to parse something called response object as response object. I'm parsing something that doesn't exist. And
Oh, there you go.
not a string.
There you go. Okay.
All right, and let's try one more time. Okay, so we at least know we've got the URL coming through. And as my final step, let's try to throw this back into parent.set value because we can't use abstract.
I think, and I was looking it up, I don't know that it's actually, I think it might be a future reserve word, but
I'd buy that. That makes sense.
I don't know that it does anything now, but it is reserved by the compiler.
Cool.
Best I can tell in 20 seconds of Googling.
Got it. Because I've never, ever encountered that in actual JavaScript code anywhere. So that would make sense if they had plans for it down the road. All right, so that actually worked, and we see our live update happen here. Admin has modified this. So anytime we change this URL now, we're going to get a new link. So let me save it. And theoretically, what I would do is I would add a short link here, some kind of field that's going to store that. Let me just go ahead and open this up and try this thing out. And sure enough, it is working. So the other thing, yeah. So we're in business, and then I can also come in here to the main Bitly UI, and I can see what I've done. So I can actually come in here and see all these links that I've created. And then if we wanted to do cool stuff in the future, we can start to take advantage of things like let's pull back all of the views, or let's pull back statistics about various things. We can manage other aspects of the link.
So to summarize where we are, almost everything about this is working, other than what we don't know is how to get we're not getting the access token generically out of the OAuth information and passed to that REST message. That's the one missing piece of the whole deal. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, that's the one missing piece. Along with, there's a possibility that we may have to do some special things when refreshing the token. And we won't know that until we actually encounter an expired token and the system tries to go and get a refreshed token from that. The way that works is basically there's this concept where you have a refresh token that you pass instead of re-authenticating. And so that's another potential, but we don't know that that's a problem.
So is it fair to say that although there is an OAuth spec, it's more wiggly than what one would expect from a spec?
It's very fair to say that. And
okay.
It's a spec. I don't even know if it's considered finalized. I do believe it's in some sort of final, pre-release draft form. And then on top of that, what's interesting is today we only talked about one type of OAuth. We talked about, if I go back into our registry, let me just pull this up. There are multiple kinds of OAuth that you can encounter, and so we've dealt with authorization code, but there's resource owner password credentials, there's client credentials, and these are other ways that you can actually deal with OAuth where maybe the end user doesn't have the ability to log in on that page interactively. And so there are lots of things you can encounter. So keep that in mind. Definitely wiggly.
Okay. All right. That, whew.
Yeah, lots of fun.
So, oh my goodness. It definitely seems like there's a a pre-qualification step. There's definitely a step between. I got this from you. Like, so you basically, let me go ahead and I'm gonna de-present you from everybody if I can do that. So that we're so definitely it seems like there's a step between doing your code and I don't know what I'm trying to say. There's a step between there's basically an exploratory step where you have to look what's kind of moving over the wire in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect to have to do it in an API, like a standard API.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair to say, because even if you can get the API up and running, you still have to deal with everything related to OAuth and the interactions related to that. And I've got some visitors.
Smile.
You're on live camera. But yeah, so definitely some exploration. Definitely spend some time before you go out there and start to build your integration. Explore this thing. Try to make it work, and try to Google for other other people having the same experience.
Mm-hmm. So this is going to be, I mean, you need to build this in your development time budget, that you should not have the expectation that you hook this up and the first pass runs, because you may have to do some scripting in the middle. You may have to do the same thing you did, which is explore the return values. You may have to look at the headers, do all kinds of stuff. You may have to use some external tools. It may not just be plug and play.
Yeah. Now, and that is very true. Now, the opposite can also be true. There are APIs, and I've definitely found this, I think, with some of the Google APIs, where it was a lot easier to get things up and running. And so I think you'll find some where things are going to go smooth, and you're not going to run into any issues at all. It's just something to factor in.
Okay. Well, that's some interesting stuff. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Josh. Let me look over. I don't believe we have any new questions. Kevin was the primary asker of questions there, and I think he said he had to leave. Whoa, 1 second. Do we have some more? No. Okay. All right. So no further questions, Your Honor. I believe we're good on that front. So with that, I salute Josh for his hard work, and I salute everybody who showed up, and everybody who's watching later, and everybody who finds some value in this. And so I'm definitely going to try to, we'll try to put the metadata out there, because I think this can be a good resource for people, because I guarantee, like, if you sat me down with OAuth, I'm going to run into these problems, and I'm not going to know off the top of my head what to do. So hopefully you can have saved that 3-day head banging effort for people that come after you.
I hope so. I definitely hope so. And if you do run into these things, shoot us a line or ask a question in SNDevs or whatever the case is, because, we may have found whatever that solution was already. And I'm promising to be writing some additional blog posts specifically about OAuth and some of these configuration challenges. And
just as a housekeeping thing, you can always, it never hurts to, if you want to get our attention, never hurts to make a post in the community and tag us. We will know if you do that. So that might be the best bang for your buck, because you get the whole developer community, that's active on there. So we're talking about community.servicenow.com. You'll get those people, and if you tag us, then we'll also know it, and so we know specifically to come and look at that post, and maybe you can get an answer if you're running into problems.
Absolutely. And
with that, let us head into our weekend. Thank you very much, Josh, and thank you everybody else. I'm sort of a sloppy dismount because we're kind of doing it all twice. But all right, bye everybody.
Have a good weekend.